This morning's scripture reading comes from Ruth chapter 1. We'll be reading verses 12 through 13. Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me.
Good morning, church. So good to be together again. I'm so thankful for each one of you who has taken out of your time and realized that this is something good. And for those of you who are permanently part of the body of Christ here, it feels so good to see each and every one of you. Every time I look at you, I know there's something about me that is a little bit of a thorn in the flesh. I don't have really good tells as to whether I really like you and whether I really love you. And I want you all to be assured I really do. I really love you and I really like you. And it's a wonderful blessing for me to be here every Sunday. And I also realize as we come together and we come together as this family, that it ought to be a time where we can find a people that we can share with each other even the hardest of times. It's as if we are a trampoline. And life keeps jumping on top of us and off us. And we get something hit us really hard and it bounces back off. And then we have to quickly reset ourselves so that we can be ready for the next thing in life that's going to come and hit us. And that's what life is like. And that is what the idea behind today's lesson is. It's resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back. And sometimes, you have life hits you really hard and you bounce back, but before you can fully bounce back, life hits you again. And then eventually you get to say, am I never going to get a break? What have I done wrong? Have I upset God? Is it just that I just have not the luck of the Irish, let's say. What's going on? And today's lesson is designed to teach you what to do in circumstances like this. So if you have an outline, you can look at the back page and you can see what to do, or you can do what I did. I just took a few minutes and I wrote the word trouble, nice and big. And then I started to list all the troubles that I have. And it just took me a few seconds to do that. So if you would do that, either use the newsletter or grab those little pieces of paper in front of you, you will find that you're going to get a lot more out of this lesson. So when I wrote down all the troubles I have, one of the troubles I have is church. Bill, what caused Paul the Apostle a lot of anxiety, right? It's the church. And when the church is doing well, I do well. But when somebody in the church is hurting, I'm hurting. And so keep that in mind. Maybe you can write church there. Children. When my children are all faithful and things are going really well, I'm doing well. But when they're not doing well like they should, then I struggle. I've also got the word clarity. Yes, I'm a preacher, so I make everything rhyme with C. I didn't do that on purpose. But clarity, I found out that I'm going to have to consult for a cataract in pretty soon. And so I'm kind of looking forward to that because my one eye is not as strong as what it should be. And so maybe that's a thorn in the flesh that you can identify with, something health-related. I've got also on my list here calendar. Sometimes things get really busy, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes I'm on vacation and having a good time, but keeping your calendar balanced is pretty a good idea. And then the last C I wrote in is cardio. Am I exercising enough? So out of all of this, and not my list, because obviously if you listen real carefully, this is not a complete list. What is it that's really, really troubling you? If you had to take all the things that could be bothering you, and you can write it in code if you feel like it, but just so that you know what you're writing, what is the number one thing that you're struggling with? So if you'll do that, then we're going to go through and we're going to see how to be resilient. And as I was thinking about this topic, I'm familiar with the term resilience from counseling because as the church has gotten weaker in America, people have had to come up with other strategies to survive. And the buzzword is resilience. It makes much more sense when you do it from a Christian perspective because every one of these formulas or solutions all have included the word faith or higher power or actually God or this religion. They've all got something because they've realized you cannot be resilient. You cannot bounce back unless you have somebody taking care of you and somebody that you can rely on other than yourself. So when we come to Ruth, and Ruth is about the best place to go to if you want to know about resilience, at least that's what I was thinking as I was scanning the Bible in my mind, you'll find that there are three main characters. There's Boaz, he's going to be the serious farmer. There's Naomi, the widow, and there is Ruth, the daughter-in-law. And she will also eventually, well, I don't want to spoil the story too much, so let's keep going with that. But if you have your Bibles, you can open to Ruth or you can just follow along, and I'll have all the text there. Obviously, I can't cover every verse because I think you do want to eat sometime. The food does smell good. All right, so if we start with verse 1, you'll see it says, in the days of the judges. This was a very evil time of Israel. This is a time when Israel, because their leadership were making some very bad decisions. And because of this, a famine came on the land. And so there's this young little family, Elimelech and Kilion and Mahlon and his wife Naomi. They decide that they're going to go to a place where there is food. You know where they're going to go? You know what they choose to do? They choose to go to Moab, their ancient enemies, the people of God don't get on well with, the people that God doesn't get along well with. And so they go there. No sooner are they there, but they start to find they need resilience. They start to find trouble. And so if you can identify with this and your trouble, then you'll understand why I'm going to say the first thing you've got to do is let go of the past if you're going to be resilient. So look at all the things that happened to this family. They have this terrible famine come, but the two girls, they get married and they've got themselves Moabite wives, and Orpah and Ruth are the two wives that they have. But Elimelech dies. The patriarch dies. And so Naomi is a widow. And in those days, if you were a widow lady, you couldn't get money. You had to have sons or grandsons or great-grandsons. You had to have somebody helping you to bring in the money. So when it says that she was a widow, this was very serious. But then guess what happens? Her two sons die. Now, ladies, put yourself in that position. You realize your husband is going to leave Bethlehem, and if you're an Ephrathite, and so if you're in Bethlehem, you have a really good support system around you. Things are tough, but at least you have family. Your husband decides that he's going to take off to this dangerous world with your two sons. Would you be happy with that, or would you in your mind be second-guessing his decision? See, this is scary because he's going to be okay. They're men. No matter what happens, you're not. You're going to be in trouble. And so, sure enough, things start to happen and they're bad. And they live there for about 10 years and both of these sons die. And she realizes that she has to say farewell to this country because she's learned that the Lord has visited on his people. And so there's food now back in Jerusalem. And so she takes up with all of them, and as she starts to walk down the road, I think her brain started to work again. And so she realizes that she's going to have to say farewell to her daughter-in-laws also. And she says to them, listen, this is not good that you come with me, but you're going to have to turn around. And so Orpah kisses her, and the bottom there in yellow, you can see more or less where I have it on the underlined words. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, and she's crying, and she goes back. But Ruth says, wherever you go, I'm going to go. Where you die, I'm going to die. Your people will be my people. In other words, your God is going to be my God. And it's a tremendous statement of faith on her side. And so even though things are going really bad with Naomi, there is something there that is a little bit good. But is she going to realize it? You see, to be resilient when life is really crushing you down, if you can have even the slightest ray of hope, hang on to it. But I don't think she's quite ready for that because she's just lost too much. And so she realizes she can't argue anymore. And so they go down the road and they come to Bethlehem, and all her old friends come and surround her. They're so happy to see her. And, how's it going? She says, and this is twice in chapter 1, she says, God has turned his hand against me. Even in one of the translations says, God's fist is against me. So instead of looking towards the one person that can help her, she blames God. And she puts enmity or division between herself and God. But with all of this said and done, if you can look at the last words, you'll see that when she came back to Bethlehem, she says, don't call me Naomi anymore, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which is bitter. But it says they came back in the time of the barley harvest. Do you think that was a coincidence? Do you think they were just lucky? If you look carefully as a Christian and you start to do what God tells you to do, you turn your life back towards God, you're going to start seeing little things, little coincidences, boy, I was so lucky. How did this come together? But it's not. God is working behind the scenes. But the one thing I want to just, before we leave this section, just let you really think about. Naomi made a big mistake when she said, call me bitter. Because she was identifying with the one thing that will make you not resilient. If you get bitter in your soul, it's because you're blaming somebody. And she's bitter in her soul because she's blaming who? Because she's blaming God. God can't control our decisions. God couldn't control Elimelech from doing what he was doing. And I don't know how many other young men took their families into the land of the Moabites. But he can be there when you turn around, when you start to point your life towards him. And even if you find yourself in an enemy territory, in a foreign world, you can still turn your life towards God. And God will be wherever he needs to be, because right now we live in a kingdom where the Spirit can be wherever it needs to be. And so the first thing you have to understand is renounce the old life. And so how do you renounce the old life? By daily saying to you, my life is changed. I'm not going to get that back. I can say to myself, my eyesight has changed. I'm not going to get that back. All I can focus on is my eyesight. Many years ago, I got back surgery. I made a point in my mind not to focus on it. So when there was any pain, I just wouldn't focus on the pain. And so it didn't become overwhelming. It became part of my normal life to where now I can't even know that I had back surgery. Except if I stand too long or sit too long, then I can pick it up again. But some people just don't have that ability. Let's take, for example, a wife that's been married 3 times. And every single time, her husband cheats on her. So when she gets married the 3rd or the 4th time, what's she going to think about her current husband if she can't let go of the past? She's going to start to have trust issues, right? She's going to say, he must be cheating on me. There's a story that might make a little bit more sense to you of Adam. He's fast asleep one day, and he wakes up, and Eve is poking him in the side. I mean, she's just poking him like this. And so he wakes up and says, Eve, what you doing? And Eve says, I don't trust you. I'm counting your ribs. I think some of you got that one. You've got to get out of the past in order to step into the new. So when you look at your trouble, accept it. It's the new normal. And start to see it this way. When the devil gave Jesus a black eye by trying to kill him, what did Jesus do? In other words, when the devil bruised the heel of Christ, the seed of Eve, what did the seed of Eve do to the devil? He crushed his head. You see, you can look at it like God is looking at it, and you're going to see it a little bit different. Number 2, and this comes to chapter 2, and this is probably the most difficult one to do once you've said, okay, there's a new normal. I'm never going to get yesterday back. I've got to think about it different. So if I'm, for example, Olga, and I've just come out of Ukraine, what am I going to have to say to myself? I'm not in Ukraine anymore. I'm now in the Oklahoma Panhandle or Oklahoma, and there's nothing here. I'm going to have to pull myself up from my bootstraps. That's chapter 2. Dawid and I, we've moved often, but before we moved, we knew a people that were called the When We Were's. They were from Zimbabwe. And guess what the When We Were's were doing? They were in South Africa now, but they were always talking about when we were in Zim, as Melissa would say. So Melissa, does it help to live that way? No, you're not in Zimbabwe anymore. Where are you? You're here. Now you have to look at what's going on. So if you can let go of the past, then you can open your eyes to look at the resources that you have in the present. And that's so important. What resources do you have? So the first verse starts to tell you about the resources. I don't think Naomi's even thought about it. I think the text is just saying, you know what? She has a kinsman, redeemer, a family member that's a close family member to them. And that's Boaz. So it just mentions it. But here's this young Ruth, and she says, you know what? I think we've had enough of a pity party. I think we've sat in this house of doom and gloom enough. I've got to go. I can't keep doing this. I've got to get busy. And so that's what this first section is, where she says, go, my daughter. And so she goes, and again, she just so happens. See that? See those words in green? She just so happens. Luck? Coincidence? Or the hand of God? What do you think? She just so happens to start working. She's a foreign girl. She doesn't know the lay of the land. She doesn't know who a kinsman's redeemer. I don't even think she understands 100% a kinsman's redeemer, the concept. She just so happens to go work on the place, the land in Bethlehem, all that agricultural land. She goes and works on the one person that could actually help her. And so as she starts to work, you see Boaz starts to take an interest in this whole thing as well. So let me just catch up on my notes over here. All right. So she happens to do that, and so Boaz comes over there, and he says, whose young woman is this? So I want you to see if you can spot another thing about being resilient and being resourceful. It says, they say this is the young woman that came with Naomi, and verse 7, she said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reaper. So one of the things about resilience and resourcefulness is you need to learn to communicate. Whether you are the biggest introvert in the world, whether it pains you to talk to people, if you got to use your intelligence. God gave you a brain for a reason, and that reason is, in this case, step number 2 is to survive. And so you've got to go and look at where you can work. What resources do you have? And so she comes and she communicates to these people, foreign people to her, and she just says, listen, I want to work along with these ladies. And it says this of her. So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. What is the emphasis? The emphasis is 2 Thessalonians 3:10, if you want to have it straight. If you don't work, you will not eat. That's a biblical concept. We can spend another few weeks on the word laziness, and I can show you that laziness or sluggard is not something that the Bible is a fan of. If you're going to be resourceful, look at where your roots are, look at the resources that you have, and then roll up your sleeves and get out of the house, get off that lazy boy, get off that couch, get off that bed, and get busy. Don't let the world tell you that you deserve a break. Don't let the doctor say to you that you cannot go back and work because of some injury. No doctor can tell me that. No doctor is going to be able to tell me that I can't support my family. It's not going to happen. So you have to get busy. And we see that's what happens there. And then we see the encounter with Boaz. There's a conversation. He talks to her, and he tells the young man, how to treat her well. And then she says to him in the middle there, how come you're treating me as a foreigner so well? And the idea comes back, well, look at how you're a noble woman. Look at how you treated Naomi. Look at how you left your country. You left your people. You came to a land that you didn't know. This is something that Boaz, being a man of God, of noble character, the text says, this is something he can respect, and he does. And so we see that it continues with an invitation to come and sit and eat with him, and also instructions to his workers to leave her extra. As you're working, just throw down some extra barley so that she can have some extra stuff to take home. And so that extra stuff, it was quite a bit. You see at the back, at the bottom, I put in parentheses, she gleaned between 20 to 25 pounds when she shook that barley out. The actual barley. So you can imagine the amount of stuff she must have been carrying. I don't know how she carried that. To be able to actually, when you beat it out, get 20 to 25 pounds worth of barley. And then she goes back And she tells Naomi what had happened, and Naomi is absolutely marveling. She says, you know what? This is God. I met Boaz. You met who? Boaz. Let me tell you about Boaz, Naomi says. He's our kinsman's redeemer. What is that? Okay, this is what a kinsman redeemer is. And she probably explained, this is a cultural practice where you marry the widow and you can carry out the bloodline of the person who died. And so here we find Elimelech's bloodline is going to maybe be able to continue in this way. About this time of the year, when the wind is blowing really bad, I'm reminded of the tumbleweeds in Oklahoma. And I realize that there are two kinds of plants you can grow. Tumbleweeds can grow 6 foot high. And so you can have a tree in 1 year, get about 6 foot high, and you can have a tumbleweed in 1 year that can get about 6 foot high. What's the difference between the two? The one will put on roots, and the other one will not put down roots. It will just keep rolling. It just keep gathering. It'll just keep feeling sorry for itself. It'll just keep blaming God and blaming everybody. Woe is me. There comes a point where you have to say this. Number one, let go of the past. Number two, what are my resources? Then comes the rest. Then comes the providential care of God. And then woven throughout the story of Ruth is the hand of God. And I pointed out several ways that you could have seen the hand of God. And it's just amazing when you look at this. And you can see that they're not just relying on the hand of God. They're working really, really hard as they go through all of this. And so you see, first of all, the plan where Naomi says to Ruth, you know what? You don't deserve to live like this. We can do something about it. And Naomi starts to explain to her the culture of that day. Every culture has a way to court another person or to date another person. There's all kinds of ways. I think today it's probably online dating or something like that. But there's traditions and there's ways, there's things you can do and things you cannot do. And so she says, this is what I want you to do. You know those black clothes that you're wearing, those widow garments that you're wearing? I think it's time you take them off. And I think you need to go bathe, and I think you need to put on some nice perfume, and I think you need to go and wait to the threshing floor where Boaz is going to be sleeping. Wait for him to be a little bit merry and for him to settle down. And when he's settled down and you can hear he's sleeping, go to his feet. Sneak out, go to his feet, lift the corner of the blanket off. That's a crazy, crazy tradition, isn't it? But she does that. And so she lifts the corner of his blanket, and he wakes up, and it's midnight, and he's shocked. I mean, he's stunned. Who's this woman? Who are you? And she says, I am basically Ruth, and I'm your closest kin, and it's almost like a marriage proposal. She's telling him, hey guy, this is what you need to do. Why do you think she needs to communicate with this guy this clearly? Because he's a bit old, you see. He's forgotten what it's like to date. And so she's saying, you know what, you need to do this. Spread your wings of your servant over me, in other words, for you are a redeemer. Well, he is excited about this. He says, you know what, blessed are you, you're a wonderful lady. You could have gone to one of the younger guys, but you rather came to me. And that's what tells me he wasn't one of the young bucks. And basically this makes you a very worthy woman in his sight. Verse 12 says, and now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until morning. And when morning comes, as a precaution, you need to get up while it's still dark. I don't want tongues to wag, And there was nothing inappropriate happen, and Scripture makes it very clear. And also, by the way, before you leave, let me give you a whole bunch. It's almost like she gets a bridal price, worth of barley, pure barley that she takes home. And she goes back and she steals Orpah. The top left-hand picture is how she took the blanket over the corner of his feet. The top left, right one, I should have made it bigger. It says, he said, yes, it's okay, this is great. And she says, listen, let me tell you, I know man. This guy's not going to sleep until this thing is done this day. And sure enough, he gets after it. But throughout this whole thing, you can see the hand of God woven throughout the story. I remember a few years ago, Deween and I were walking, and Deween, I think you remember when we took this picture. That was a snake. It was just a little bit ahead of us, and I wondered at the time, I wonder how many times I've almost stepped on a snake, and God helped me, right? Some of you can't see it. This is a blown-up picture of the snake, but this was taken from quite a distance away, and it looks like a crack in the ground. But if you saw the wind squirming and you saw how quickly it moved, you would have realized that's not a crack in the ground. It was a snake. But how many times have you and I almost gotten into trouble, and God took care of us, right? In Africa, as I've walked as a young child, I often wondered, how many wild animals are looking at me right now? And I can just keep walking and I'm safe. I can see the hand of God from young days in my life until right now I can see the hand of God. And I see the hand of God mostly in my life when I'm walking in God's path. If one of the troubles you wrote down there is a sin that is pulling you down, you're going to have a lot fewer times to be able to say, wow, that was coincidence. Boy, I was lucky. The more you step away from sin and more you walk in the path of God, the more He's going to be able to bless you. And that brings us to the fourth point, and that is the reward, where you're actually going to be able to reap what God has given you. And so you find here the summons where Boaz goes to this kinsman's redeemer, and he says, "Sir, I need to talk with you." He goes to 10 elders of the city, and he says, "Will you please come and sit down with me?" In other words, we got business that we got to deal with here. And he says to this kinsman's redeemer, Elimelech died, and he's left a parcel of land. If you want to redeem it, redeem it. If not, I'm the next one in line. I will redeem it. So what do you think the guy says? In greed. I'll redeem it. And then, Boaz is a pretty sharp dude. Then he springs the trap. Says, okay, and by the way, here is Ruth. As you acquire this land, you will be acquiring Ruth also. And the guy says, you know what, if I do that, I'm going to have my estate in jeopardy. I'm not going to do it. I cannot do it. You go ahead. And so we have this really nice thing. First of all he sees is this parcel of land. And then you see Boaz pointing out to Ruth and says, no, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. And so they have the sit down where the man has to take off his sandal. And that's taking off the sandal is a sign that he's giving up his right to redeem. And Boaz says, okay, guys, all of you are witnesses, and they witness, and you'll see down at the bottom where may the Lord make this woman, like Rachel and Leah, and they put this incredible blessing on her. And because everything was going right, because they were making the right decisions, right things were happening. And you find that Ruth now has a baby. And Naomi, who came with such bad news, is going to end this with such good news, And it's amazing how you see the plan of God, how they sit down and they plan. First of all, you'll see Elimelech making a plan with his family. And then you'll see in chapter 2, you'll see Naomi and Ruth start to make a plan. And then in chapter 3, you'll find Boaz start to make a plan. And that's just to tell you, if you're going to be resilient, you have to realize between these 2 ears, God gave you something. You know what it's called? It's called a brain. And He gave you that brain to use it. And He gave you big, strong arms so you can get busy and you can get industrious. So if you'll let go of the past and you'll realize this is my resources, these are my roots, this is my family. And so imagine as a church what we can say. This is our family. This is our roots. We're going to be okay. Yes, I'm really struggling right now. My life is so chaotic. It's filled with chaos. And it's not chaos even of my own bringing. It's chaos that other people around me are bringing. How can I get out of it? Let go of the past. Get resourceful. Do what your hands find to do. Rest, chapter 3, in God's providential care. And God is going to take care of you. And you will see fruit. All you've got to do is think about your past. Think about how many times life was tough and God managed to bring you through. We have a really good live analogy today. If you'll just pay attention a little bit, you'll see that there's a squirrel in your backyard. And that squirrel is working really, really hard. And so that's what I kind of want you to do. And so as I was going through my notes, I wrote all my troubles, and then I said, number one, what will I renounce? You've got to write something there. What will you renounce? Number two, what are my resources? List all the resources that you have. Number three, rest in God's will. I will attempt to see God's hand, even if it's just looking at a little industrious squirrel. If that squirrel doesn't prepare for winter, what's going to happen to that squirrel? It will starve. It will starve to death. It will not survive. And so you realize this is an important thing. Resilience is a very, very important concept. But finally, receive and be thankful. You know, in all the prayers we've had today, I've listened carefully, and I've heard the people start with prayers of thankfulness. Thank you, God, for what you've given us. If you're subject to the gospel invitation today, we always talk about coming forward for prayer and for baptism, and I would like to suggest that. I would like to suggest that that's your starting point, that you bring before God what you've written down on those pieces of paper. If it's telling you, this is the time that I need to bring Christ my broken life, then this is how I'm going to do it. I'm no longer going to sit in this. I'm no longer going to have a pity party. I'm no longer going to say it's everybody, my happiness, my success is everybody else's priority. It's not. How many times must I be duped? How many times must I climb up a slippery wall until I realize this thing's not going anywhere? It's not going to work. I have to get busy. If you're subject to the gospel invitation, please come forward right now as together we stand and